Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining our RapidLEI 101 webinar. Today, I'm Simon Wood, Chief Executive Officer of Ubisecure. I'm joined by Steve Roylance, our Senior Vice President for Identity Services. I'd like to kick off by handing over to him to take you through the agenda of what we're going to cover in the next half an hour or so. Steve.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Okay, so hi everyone. Introductions first. I'll go on to a slide with some more complete detail in a moment. I think it's really important that we look at what an LEI is. Some of the LEI concepts might be fairly new to you. It might be the first time you've heard of this. Hopefully, in a couple of years, we'll all know what an LEI is. It's important to think also to look at how LEIs are issued. So I've got a little flow diagram that will go through and explain some of the key moving parts. And really, the focus is what drives adoption. How are we going to increase the number of LEIs out in the field? And we touch on that later on in the presentation. RapidLEI itself is about identity management, and we have a platform for doing this. So the demo will be sort of the core component of this webinar. So we'll go through some of the benefits of choosing RapidLEI, and then go on to the demo, and really then just have a quick glimpse of what we expect to see in the future, given the team that we have behind this platform and some of the knowledge we have over the last decade or so. A little bit of time at the end for question and answers. So, quick introduction to myself. I'm Steve Roylance, in the role of Identity Services, the Senior Vice President at Ubisecure. And the primary responsibility that I have is for the Legal Entity Identifier project that we call RapidLEI. We chose the name specifically to show that we would issue LEIs quickly, but also accurately, because of the ways that we connect to all the business registries that we currently serve. And you'll see that from the demonstration later. Myself, I have 15 years experience in identity assurance ecosystems, primarily in the certification authority industry up until about 18 months ago. So that gives me a wealth of knowledge around this area, and also allows us to look into that crystal ball and see how we can use our knowledge within that industry to try and see how things will change later on as we move forward. I was the founder of the CAB forum, so this is the CA browser forum, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's the group that ultimately led to higher levels of identity assurance on the internet. So for example, one of the business registries we work with is the Companies Registration Office in Ireland. But you may not know that the CRO.IE was the URL for that. But luckily, with an extended validation certificate, it clearly indicates that you're talking to the Companies Registration Office, because the certification authority responsible for issuing that SSL TLS certificate to that entity places that information in there. So a really good method of identifying companies and organizations and people that you're transacting with. But I think as we move forward, there are better ways of showing more information and just sort of increasing the capabilities of that system, and that's what we'll touch on later on. Ubisecure itself is a customer identity and access management company, and what I'll just pass over back to Simon, who can talk about that.
Thanks, Steve. So just for those that are on the call, just to give you a little background about Ubisecure. We are a European-focused customer identity access management CIM provider. We have a rich, long history, established in 2002, headquartered in Helsinki in Finland. We are today the only European CIM provider that delivers both cloud and on-premise deployments. We find that depending upon use cases, deployment scenarios, security needs, and so on, our customers appreciate both the ability to not be able to trouble themselves with the management of the platform, or to hold it close as a cybersecurity product and have it within their infrastructure environment. So having both those options is particularly important. We have some great customer and partner references and from the work that we've done over the time that we've done it. And we've been delivering strongly for quite a long time period. As we move forward, we're now expanding very strongly from Finland across Europe. So through the Nordics, Northern Europe, strong growth in the UK right now, pushing down into Germany and Benelux, and then to the wider kind of Western Europe as well, following on from that. It's a great time for Ubisecure. We have a lot of growth going on and a lot of commercial expansion based on the platform that we already have and the success that we've had within the Nordics to date. As part of that, as you've heard from Steve, we've launched RapidLEI. We achieved our GLEIF accreditation as an LEI issuer on the 2nd of May this year. And that's been driving forwards in a very strong way since then. So I think with that, back to Steve to continue on that, following on from that accreditation. Obviously, the formal launch of the platform was shortly after the accreditation. There is some go live work and so on that we have to cater for around that. But we've been delivering now in terms of active sales since the 31st of May. Steve.
Okay, thanks, Simon. So I think, yeah, although the platform itself was only really came into existence on the 31st of May, as I mentioned, the group that is responsible behind this has that 15 years worth of experience plus, and that's just myself as an individual. Obviously, there's a much larger group. So we've placed all of that knowledge into the platform to try and make the platform very extensible, very useful for the future, both for our immediate retail customers who are just buying a single LEI, or enterprise customers that need multiple LEIs, or indeed partners and agents who would like to issue LEIs on behalf of their own customer base or their own clients. So really, just first of all, just what is an LEI? Legal Entity Identifier. I'll go through the reasons on why the LEI was formed in the following slide, but it's an international standard, a little bit small to see there, but it's 2012 that was first created. So the ISO standard itself is a 20-digit number. And the format is structured such that the LEI can be, also the issuer of the LEI can be identified. So we have what we call an LOU identifier as the first 4 digits of that prefix. LOU stands for Local Operating Unit. It was the original name for LEI issuers, and that's tending to change slightly now as we move forward. So an example here is the Ubisecure number, which is 9845. We then have 2 zeros. There is then a string of digits, which doesn't really mean anything. It's random digits. And then we have some check digits at the end. The advantage that number gives is, one, that it's globally unique, and it is presented in an open database along with a lot more valuable information, and that information level will grow as best practice moves things forward. So here's an example. If we look at the GLEIF database and take that single record that's currently in the database for Ubisecure OY, and what you'll see from this, there's a lot of information that's presented, a lot more than would be presented in a current certificate if you were to just look at the certificate. But there's also some enhancements there. Not only do you have options for transliterated entity names, you also have things like the registration authority ID. Now that might not mean a lot to people, but it's very difficult on a worldwide basis to know who all the registration authorities are. And the GLEIF have done an exceedingly good job in trying to pull all of that information together. For many years, it was only available sort of on Wikipedia and some knowledge bases. And a few registries used to point to each other, but certainly no coordinated effort to try and bring that information to a defined list. And that is maintained on a regular basis by the GLEIF. What also happens, and is another advantage, is the entity's legal form is also maintained on a slightly different enumerated list. So what we have here, 9999, is a temporary code because Finland at the moment has not adopted the entity legal form code method. I'll give you an example later of the UK that has, and there's many jurisdictions that have. Some 1,600 different entity legal forms are available from that list as we speak, and those will be added and others will be added later on. That's also an ISO 20275 which covers that. So you can see a wealth of information presented within this, including the address and whether or not there's a legal address which is found within the business registry and corroborated to that, or headquarters address that might be necessary. Well, that's only a glimpse of what we call level 1 information, which really talks about the entity itself. There is also a secondary level 2 information, which potentially starts to look into the parental structure from an accounting point of view, and I'll cover that as we go forward. So let's have a look at the LEI issuance process. So we start off with the legal entity, an applicant. So LEIs at the moment cannot be issued to individuals. They can only be issued to legal entities. There are some other special forms, such as funds that can apply for an LEI. And that's currently being looked at by the GLEIF to try and tighten the rules about those, and the majority are definitely issued to businesses themselves. So the business, whoever was able to apply for an LEI, would approach the team at RapidLEI and use our platform, enroll on the platform, and go through the LEI application process. So we have a back-end system that has been configured as the local operating unit to be able to issue the LEI. And what we do, we've placed all of those enumerated business registries, the ELF codes, and there's 2 examples there. 535 is the UK company registry, and the ELF code, the H0PO Oscar, is the limited company type. All of those are into the platform. And during the application process, we ask the applicant about their parental structure, their direct parent and their ultimate parent. And this is from an accounting point of view. So it doesn't necessarily at the moment mean that we use information in the business registry. And we saying the entire sort of LEI issuance community, and again I'll go through that in another slide so you can see who makes the decisions here, have allocated the accounting principles as the main mechanism for people as a common standard across the world. There are many other methods that could be used, but accounting has been deemed as the major one. So on a daily basis, we would take the LEI that's been issued after we've gone through the verification processes that are required. We would take the legal entity reference data, so LERD, from that record. We would also send the relationship records, if there were any, to any parents, or exception records if there are no relationships that exist. And currently it's about 80 to 85% of LEIs that are issued do not have any kind of relationship record. So they just provide exception records, and there will be 1 exception per parent, so 1 for the direct and 1 for the ultimate. That is sent to the GLEIF on a daily basis. We can actually upload 10 times on a daily basis, and other LOUs do the same thing, but only a single time per day does the GLEIF produce what they call a concatenated file, which is all of the 1.2, 1.3 million entities that are currently have an LEI. That will be increased to 3 times per day in the near future, and that then is placed onto an official location, which it becomes the official portal for obtaining information from the GLEIF. Now, the advantage for this is because it's open data charter basis that the world can download that information, can slice and dice that information to look for trends, to look for errors, and therefore there's a very good challenge process that can be instigated through the GLEIF or directly to the local operating unit, as everybody has to have a challenge sort of repository on their system, but basically through from whoever spotted the problem to the GLEIF to the local operating unit, who then talk to or look at the business registry to see if something has changed, or go back to the individual and check that if that information needs to be modified in some way. So what really drives LEI adoption, and where did it start in the first place? Well, we have to go back almost a decade to see where it started, and it really is legislation and regulation that starts to move things forward. Best practice will eventually take over and push this to a wider sort of number of verticals, and that's where we are at the moment. That sort of critical turning point from the initial legislation and regulation that came in to seeing it move over and across into other areas. And really it was born from the financial crisis over a decade ago now. And this was a quick snapshot of Wikipedia and how they represent it, and Brown being where the economies are in decline in 2009. So clearly we do not want to have that type of situation happening again. And one of the issues was the transparency from a global basis of how companies were linked together and how to identify those companies. And I think that 10 years worth of effort is starting to pay dividends now as the number of companies involved in this scheme are increasing. So the legislation and regulation in place to try and improve that situation has accelerated where we've been going, and then is now leading on to best practice. And of course that will then go back and lead to additional regulation in other areas. So I mentioned about the structure of who makes the decisions here. Well, really it's a top level down from what we call the LEI ROC. So the Regulatory Oversight Committee were put in place really by the Financial Stability Board back in the time when we were looking for a solution for this, and the group of G20 countries. So we have a very global structure behind the LEI issuance system. The GLEIF was put in place really to maintain the rule set and to ensure all LOUs in all countries were operating consistently, and all LOUs are accredited on an annual basis. And then finally, number 3 is the local operating units, and Ubisecure OY is the LOU for this. So what we've got in terms of regulation, rather than actually go through any specific regulation, because it does change over time, I'll just refer you to GLEIF's own regulation subject area. I think the important thing is that it's based on per jurisdiction. It also talks about effective date, and it talks about whether or not LEIs are required or they're recommended. And different regulations will have different needs as that moves forward. But there's really a wealth of information in there on a per country basis to see where LEIs are permeating into those different areas. What we'll be doing later on is focusing on where we see LEIs being adopted within the SSL TLS market, and that's not covered in regulations at the moment, more covered by best practice. So benefits of RapidLEI, we'll look at this before we go on to the demo. We support 26 different jurisdictions at the moment, plus the United States. Now, the United States itself is 50 different registries. So effectively, we have 76 different business registries. We've chosen those specifically that we have allocated effort into the initial launch to where 9 out of 10 of every LEI is requested or issued presently. Obviously, there's a long tail of smaller countries which are now coming on, and we will be adding countries to that jurisdictional support as we move forward, but the same benefits that you will see in the demo are presented across all of those different jurisdictions. One of the things we wanted to do was to try and avoid GIGO, so no garbage in, garbage out. And one of the things that helps that is if we can identify upfront clearly who the legal entity is that is requesting the LEI. So we have a predictive identity engine based on the sign-up procedure and some other magic, which will identify between 35 and 40% of requests to identify that company, just typing 3 letters. And again, I'll show you a demonstration of that. The real core of the RapidLEI system, though, is how we gather automatic legal entity reference data. So that real critical component of identifying the information from the business registry. And what we're trying to do is to avoid typing. Humans make mistakes. If the information has to be later verified with the registry, why don't we converse with the registry in the first place, take that information and just present it to the applicant to make sure that it's correct. This is a far better sort of working process than asking the applicant to guess what they think they're called, then have a team of people to go back and look at that and see whether or not there are any issues with that. So it generally have a far higher level of efficiency as far as the LEI application is processing is concerned. We also feature electronic signatures from a global basis and the ability to delegate out those electronic signatures. So if you don't have signing rights for the company, then you can delegate to someone who has. We also find that we don't use a power of attorney model. That tends to be too wide and too encompassing. We have a letter of authorization method, which will specifically allow people to sign, and I'll demonstrate that as we go through the platform. So the benefit really is little or no paperwork. The client agent model that we've created allows our partners to order LEIs on behalf of their clients because at the moment the LEIs are growing. So there's 1.3 million out there, but we need to be compared to the sort of 250 to 300 million companies that are out there. There's a long way to go, but we've got to start somewhere. And where we're starting at the moment is to make it an easy application process with lots of good quality data that can be taken in and presented from an open database point of view to improve everything in terms of the transparency of the whole system. And you'll see the delegation and letter of authorization workflow as we dive into the demo. So let's go into the demo now. So I'm just going to pop this to, oops, sorry, the right window, sorry. Yeah, just do this as full screen. Okay, so I've signed up in the RapidLEI system as Steve at rapidlei.com. I'll log in. In terms of configuration, all I've done is just add a sort of avatar picture of myself. So this is what we present to customers when they first arrive. We've got a very clear sort of control panel here, and the important thing is that LEIs are renewable on an annual basis, and it's in everybody's interest to make sure the information is accurate. We provide very easy ways for people to amend the both the relationship data if relationships change, or the reference data if that changes within the company registry, and our team will verify those changes before they're submitted to the GLEIF. And we have to to avoid things moving into the lapse. We do not want a lapsed LEI. The lapsed LEI indicates that information hasn't been checked on a regular basis. We can import LEIs from other LOUs, which is a fairly easy process, and we can also create new LEIs. So I think we're going to focus on creation of a new LEI at the moment. And again, all of these can be tagged together, so we can both import and create at the same time, and then place different items into the shopping cart. For speed of this demo, if I just type the 3 letters, we've already identified I'm potentially able to request an LEI for RapidLEI in the UK, and that is the company number. So the sort of immediate benefit there is that I can go straight into identifying the company. Obviously, if that didn't work in some way, we have other search capabilities to be able to identify the company, and we can just do a checkout. So here we go through the ability to change transactions. The VAT or GST fees, if applicable, will be calculated on the next screen. This is the current pricing that we have on our website. And we have the ability to add the EU VAT number here, and therefore VAT will be taken off. In terms of testing, then we have the sort of magic credit card number, which is the testing one. Of course, this won't work in reality, so you can't use it to buy something for your Christmas presents for the kids. And then we can then proceed moving forward. So we got to the point now where we've identified the company from the business registry, and we've sort of made sure that we've got a payment for that, so we can move forward. And then we go into the heavy lifting side, which would normally be the responsibility of the customer, but with a RapidLEI, it's all done for you. So again, the legal entity name is exactly as represented on the company. Notice the spelling of limited is full and capitalized, so they're not LTD dot or limited with a lowercase. The registration authority entity ID on company's registry is presented, as well as the designation of the entity legal form. And the status of this company is active. We specifically have not issued an LEI to RapidLEI Limited at the moment, so it didn't warn me there was one already existing, so we could do demos like this. And then you've got the registration authority and also the legal jurisdiction. For those of you who are or familiar with the UK, there are actually 3 different areas for the UK where you can be legally registered. So there's England and Wales, there's also Scotland and the Northern Ireland. So our system will automatically detect the relevant area and ensure that is correct as well, trying to make sure this is really accurate for the future. The address information is created automatically, as are the state region in ISO 3166-2 form and country code in 3166, again with a postal code. So a very simple process flow. Applicants have the ability to agree or not agree if something could be wrong or something needs to be updated, but generally agree, and then choose where they would like the billing. Well, I'm going to choose the legal address for this one. And again, very little typing, copy those to the My Settings, and you can continue. So that really was the main bulk of the application process, but now we have to figure out who is available to sign for this and to request the LEI. So my login name, I'm not listed as a director on the UK company registry, but Paul is, and therefore I can delegate the signing to Paul. So I have 2 choices. One, to send that directly to Paul. And Paul isn't next to me at the moment for the demo, but Paul has given me prior authorization that I can, from a letter of authorization point of view, do that. So I'm just going to enter my details in there, which is the same email address as the account. And we go into a special workflow, which is PP signing. So I have an LEI, an LOA, which I will add in there. And with this one, what that basically does is allow me then to request signing on behalf of RapidLEI, and I'll submit that. So we then create the contract, and these are the terms and service which are available on the website and standard across all the LOU issuers because they are defined by the GLEIF. So we can move to the end of this and sign, and because I'm PP signing, I can do that here. I have the option to draw or upload signatures if I so wish. and I will sign. And it's an electronic signature being added. Digital signatures will be supported towards the end of the year, so we can improve the options available for people who want to do that. And we close that down because we finished that portion of the workflow. So the final part of the demonstration is to look at the data that is provided or sorry, required from a company structure point of view. And this can get a little bit complicated, and we try to make this as easy as possible. Say 8 out of 10 at the moment, or there is either no direct parent or somebody is prevented from providing that information. You have the option to enter an LEI number of the parent if that exists, and some accounting related question and answers that they go through here. Not too onerous, but basically looking for relationship period starts, but you would be required to provide some accounting evidence to prove that relationship. What I'm going to do at the moment, I'm going to say that no direct parent exists. If I do next, then I can say the ultimate parent, so the ultimate consolidation of accounts also does not exist. It's just a single entity. And finally, the step to upload. And again, we get another opportunity of uploading a letter of authorization here if we didn't do that in the previous step. And then we can submit that. And basically that is the entire process of requesting an LEI. That will now work in the background, talk to the GLEIF, check for duplicates and perform various other items just to make sure that we can issue that LEI. So I'll now flip back to the webinar. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. And we can now just dive into our vision for SSL and TLS. So really we've seen two of these moving parts earlier, which is the applicant and Ubisecure as the LOU. And we introduced the concept of the certification authority. And generally an applicant would require an SSL TLS certificate or another type of certificate, but we'll talk about SSL at the moment from the CA. And if they had an LEI, would that help the CA? We believe yes, it would. Certification authority could have a pre-existing trust relationship with Ubisecure as the local operating unit or with any other local operating unit that we're issuing LEIs. And really it's the authentication of that LEI ownership, in other words, the ownership of the LEI that needs to be presented to the certification authority so they've done their sort of KYC requirements on that LEI owner. So the LEI itself can be passed directly to the certification authority as part of that check. And we've got a screen next which will go through in a little bit more technical detail on this. Certification authority still has to do all of their public-private key checking. They have to do their domain checking and everything. So we're not taking away anything really from some of those core activities that CA does. What we're doing is making it a lot easier for them to add in that data for the subject and therefore who is really the owner of the SSL TLS certificate in that domain. So what happens is that the LEI can be incorporated within the subject area of that certificate. And the advantages really are that browsers, when they are looking at that subject information, can extract the information. An OID is available already by the GLEIF, and they've also published an API endpoint to be able to extract that information. And browsers in real time can look at identity and credit information on that company. Excuse me, just take a small drink. So what we have here is that the basic advantage is that the information that's in the certificate is no longer fixed completely. Of course, there will be some kind of crossover between the two as the different systems sort of improve over time. But ultimately, if you have a pointer within the certificate, you can point to that different credit data or that open data from the GLEIF to identify the actual identity of who it is you're transacting with. So here's the technical sort of breakdown. And what I'll do before I go into sort of this process flow, I'll just sort of let Simon take over in terms of things you may be more familiar with in terms of those sign in as. So Simon, if you can just sort of explain the background on that.
Sure, absolutely. So I think I suspect all of you will have experienced when you visit a third-party website, you'll often need to identify there. Sometimes you'll be asked to create an account, but often you can sign in with existing credentials. So, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google. I'm sure you've all experienced these through various different interactions that you've had with various different websites. In the background, this is all powered by standards. So again, giving attendees, you may have come across OpenID Connect or OAuth 2 as underlying protocols which allow all this to be achieved. And this essentially is the technical world that Ubisecure exists in. So our history and our core identity for individuals delivery today is around the usage of these systems based around these protocols to deliver federated sign-on to external authentication providers, such as Facebook, such as Google, such as LinkedIn. And as you'll see as we go forwards, as Steve will explain shortly, we'll have the ability to bring a RapidLEI version to that with significant extra benefits. So Steve, is that helpful to move on from there?
Thank you. Yeah, so what we're trying to do really is to present a sign-in with RapidLEI as an example here. So if we just go through this process flow fairly quickly, the certification authority is the service provider. They're providing a service to the principal, in other words, the legal entity that is registered within the RapidLEI system, who has ownership of an LEI, and you have RapidLEI becomes the identity provider. So the certification authority says sign in with RapidLEI. There's a pre-existing trust relationship, as we mentioned, and they're redirected as part of the protocol back to RapidLEI, where they authenticate, and we have various mechanisms of strengthening the authentication, allowing legal entities to really choose whether or not they want multi-factor authentication, or even whether they want to delegate out to other parties that ability to sign. Once that authentication is proven, we go back and to the certification authority, and effectively the CA has completed their KYC. The information that was in our database in terms of the LEI number can be passed over to the certification authority, but at the same time also the authorization to use that LEI number, which is really important, can be passed over. So the whole process takes microseconds compared to potentially days, hours, or even weeks in some cases when things don't quite well as expected. So we're looking really here to improve the whole ecosystem as far as being able to use the LEI in certificates, and also provide a much more streamlined, efficient method of placing the LEI into certificates. And that will increase the ability in which, or the frequency in which certificates can be issued. We also reducing the amount of fixed data in certificates and just having pointers to live data. So I think advantages all round as far as we can see in terms of helping that ecosystem. And that's the experience that we've had over the last sort of 15 years in watching this system change over that period of time. So as I mentioned, delegation is also possible. So some references here for after this webinar is finished. So the GLEIF have talked about the rise of technology. They recommend the particular OID and also their API endpoint for adding that information in. We ourselves have several blogs, one on the need for critical data accuracy as far as pushing things forward, and also how this is going to be widened for SSL TLS. So about 2 minutes over the scheduled time, but I think at this point we'll sort of sit back and look at any questions the audience may have raised at the moment, and thank you for your attention.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you for that. So I've got a question that's come in just before the webinar started. And it was around one of the points that you started looking at in terms of existing regulations, and you've told us how those regulations have been driving the growth of LEI usage to date, and that came from the financial crisis. As we look forwards, what do you see as the kind of wider drivers as we move forwards from here?
Well, I think definitely on the best practice side, and the best way to look at this, because we've been talking about the SSL TLS industry, is to look at what happened there. So if you go back 15 years, then a certificate would only be required on your web server if you were taking important information such as credit card information. Regulation came in the terms of PCI compliance, mandating that those methods should be used, and therefore that increased the number of certificates that were being used. But then people started to look at that and say, okay, well, if we're encrypting in this point, why don't we encrypt for this reason or this reason? And suddenly here we are, sort of 15 years later, and we're moving to the point where almost every website on the internet needs to be encrypted in some way because of the data it presents, so you can be assured that you're talking to the right website. but also protecting things like login credentials. So I think it's really now best practice which drives that industry, and I think that's where we're going to head. The initial work has been done, the heavy lifting of moving to sort of 1.2 million LEIs that have been issued so far has been the initial driver. There's all of the constant regulation in that's coming out from different countries to try and accelerate that, but I think best practice is really going to take over.
Excellent, thank you. I don't know if we have any external questions coming in at this point. Have we got any there?
Just one on the automated checks and what's happening there. Yeah, so as far as automation is concerned, the GLEIF have announced that they are increasing the level of automation in terms of the checking they're doing. Because they receive LEIs on a daily basis, they're able to look at those LEIs, both looking backwards to see what's already been issued and provide scores to the LOUs in terms of accuracy and to compare LOUs against each other, but also as those LEIs are submitted on a daily basis, also to provide a real point in time in terms of an API where LOUs, if there's any problem, cannot submit the initial LOU as LEI, sorry, unless that data is correct. This includes things like company number patterns, jurisdiction of incorporation, spellings for towns, cities, things like that. So it really improves the level of quality in the entire ecosystem. So as we move forward, I mentioned that sort of self-healing capability from the challenge management process. That will also pay a big dividends out as we move forward into the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of LEIs in the ecosystem.
Excellent. And no other external questions at this point?
No, I think that was.
No.
I must have addressed everything that everybody wanted to.
Perfect. In which case, Steve, thank you very much for your time on here. To all our attendees, thank you for your time, giving that up and understanding more about what we're doing with RapidLEI and the roles of the LOU and what an LEI is. This webinar will be available after the event as ever. So thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, cheers, bye-bye.